Everton 1, West Ham United 1 at the Hill Dickinson Stadium in the Premier League, where Jared Bowen popped up to thank his former manager, the man who plucked him from Hull City and set him on the road to Premier League stardom and England international caps. And he thanked him by firing the ball past Jordan Pickford to salvage a point. And who knows, on another day, it may have even been that we might have even got all three. Such was the recovery that we showed in the second half compared to the first. We'll obviously talk about all of the aspects of this match, and you can obviously get your comments in the section below, which is things that we always welcome, and I try to answer as many of your comments as I can possibly do. So, I mean, the first talking point that I guess we've got to get out there was a talking point that occurred before a ball had even been kicked, which was the omission from the matchday squad of a certain James Ward-Prowse. Now, I think that probably most people that were observant could probably see this coming down the track. The evidence was there. If you look at the fact that James Ward-Prowse, when he was on loan at Nottingham Forest last season, he was used for a few games in the early part of that loan spell and was then ditched from the squad. He was not really utilised. He was bit part player at best. And the loan deal was actually cancelled prematurely and resulted in James Ward-Prowse coming back to the West Ham squad during the course of the second half of last season. Interestingly enough, when Graham Potter first turned up, and of course that narrative continued this season with James Ward-Prowse being picked despite all sorts of protestations from the West Ham United fan base. Now, obviously, Nuno Espirito Santo finds himself the manager of West Ham United. Graham Potter era is over, and it may appear that the James Ward-Prowse era of West Ham as a West Ham player might also have come to its conclusion. That remains to be seen, but this is probably not the best news for James Ward-Prowse. As I say, the rumour is he did not travel with the squad. It wasn't a case of he pulled up lame in the pre-match warm-up or anything like that. He simply did not go with the squad to the Hill Dickinson Stadium. So the game started, and obviously you can see my presentation there, so you can obviously look at all of the bits of information like the starting lineups, etc., as we go along. And for the first half, I would say that in the main, I would say Everton, I wouldn't say dominated it, but I would say that Everton controlled the game. That is for absolute certain. And before I go too much into things, guys, please don't forget to drop a like on this stream. Don't forget, if you've got a hype that's available, to maybe give that in this direction of travel. That really does help to grow the channel because it pushes this content to places it otherwise might not get. Maybe sharing this onto your social media platform is the way to go too. And also, if you could just check to see if you are subscribed to the channel, because if you are not, if you could just click the mouse button and have the subscribe to subscribed and click the bell notification as well, so you'll be notified of all content as and when it is uploaded to the channel. Just rest assured, this doesn't cost you anything. I know the word subscription might engender images of costs. There is no cost, and we do not get any of your data sensitive information. It simply helps to grow the channel. Last I looked, we were at 1736 subscribers, so if you could come on this journey with us, I would greatly appreciate it. So it took 18 minutes before the deadlock was broken, and it was a corner. What a surprise. We've been so reliable at defending corners. I think that was our 7th goal up to this point in time in the Premier League. And when you consider that one of the games that we played up to this point was a 3-0 win, that just makes that statistic even more concerning. It was another corner that was played in. This time Areola got a punch on it. So the corner, it was not a direct from the corner goal, but it was from the resultant move from the came off of the back of the punch from Areola, where Everton retrieved the possession of the ball, played the ball from their right to their left, and a cross was played in. I believe it was James Garner. I could have got that incorrect, but the ball was played into the penalty box, and it was a leap from, of all people, Michael Keane, the centre-back, who got his head to the ball first ahead of, well, anyone really in I was about to say claret and blue, but we played obviously in an ecru colour, I think is the name of the colour strip that we played in, ecru. And yeah, so Michael Keane got up, got his head to the ball ahead of Konstantinos Mavropanos. There was also Nicholas Fulkrug in close proximity, and he arrows the ball past Alphonse Areola for a 1-0 start. Now, bear in mind that up to this point in time, Everton are undefeated at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. And indeed, they actually still are. But I believe they also had not conceded a goal up till yesterday. Now that streak has actually been snapped by the person that's on the right of this presentation slide here, Mr. Jared Bowen. And before we get into the conversation about the goal, though, let's say that I would suggest the fact that we were only the one goal down at half time is probably a fortunate thing for us, because it at least gave us a little bit of something to aim for. Obviously, if we go in 2-0, 3-0 down, then you'd think that's a long, long road back. But at 1-0 down, we had a route back in to get some sort of parity out of the situation and maybe even go on to get something else. Who knows? But we obviously come out, and one of the things that was quite noticeable was the fact that the players were actually out onto the pitch at the Hill Dickinson Stadium quite a bit before the referee and the home players emerged from the tunnel. So I would suspect that Nuno had probably got his message across to the players and sent them out to be there to await their foes at the Hill Dickinson Stadium. And the game started, and I would say that you could probably sense and feel from the early pattern of the second half that there was something of a change of emphasis, because we did seem to have a little bit more bite, a little bit more determination. I don't think that's my imagination. And one of the things that I look at, and you'll see it in the statistics, or I think it might have already gone past, but if it comes again, just have a little look. When you look at the fact that we, in the first two home games at London Stadium, and bear in mind they were games that were at home against London rivals Tottenham and Chelsea, the fact that we didn't pick up a yellow card, I think, was indicative of a lack of fight, a lack of aggression. And I'm not saying that you need to go out and you need to break anybody's legs or anything like that, but you do have to have a level of aggression, a level of fight, a level of, we are going to push you to the absolute limit about your performance. And one of the byproducts of that can sometimes be that you maybe sort of rack up the fouls, you pick up the yellow cards and things like that. And in those first two games, as I say, we didn't pick up a singular yellow card. Now, if you look at the stats for fouls and you look at the stats for yellow cards for this match, I think that you could probably interpret that there's been a little bit of a sea change in terms of the mentality that Nuno has tried to feed into his players. I mean, he talks about he wants to turn it into a quite unpleasant place for opposition players and fans to go in some of his talk with the media. And I think that possibly maybe that's something he's trying to get into his players, that you guys are too nice. That there, just to sort of get the point across, this is the Premier League official man of the match, who, as per the Premier League website for yesterday. Now, one thing I will say about that second half performance, about a player that stood out, and I'm not saying that Jared Bowen did not stand out, because obviously he got the equaliser and he did stand out, but I would suggest that if I had my way, the Premier League man of the match would actually have been the young man that occupied the opposite wing. Crysencio Somerville last night, in my humble opinion, was nothing short of sensational. Absolutely electric. He tore his opposite number O'Brien, an absolute new one as far as I'm concerned. He was twisting him one way and the other, and his electric pace absolutely turned the game in our favour. Of that, I don't believe there is any doubt. And for me, I think he was the man of the match. The goal from Bowen was typical Bowen, really. You know, he gets the ball on the right hand side, he cuts inside, he gets his shot away, gets it past the defender, and it arrows into the top corner past Jordan Pickford for the equaliser, and he wheels away in absolute celebration. And the fans that made that journey up there, and obviously my friend on the channel, Charlie Woodgate, made the journey up there yesterday, and I'm sure he jumped for joy at that particular goal hitting the back of the net. And to be honest with you, I think even from that point on, in my opinion, I think that we would have actually been wouldn't have been out of line if we'd have got all 3 points. We did have opportunities, little half chances here and there as the game petered on. I probably would say, though, that on balance, probably a point apiece, is probably not an unfair result. And as I say, it doesn't change us positionally, but I do think, on the basis of the performance that I saw yesterday at the Hill Dickinson Stadium yesterday, and especially in the second half, I think that it would appear to me that Nuno Espirito Santo has basically said to his players that they need to be a little bit more of a team that get stuck in. And I've got no problem with that. I think for me, that's part of what being a West Ham player should be all about. It's not just about silky skills, Cruyff turns, overhead kicks, Rabonas, and all the. Don't get me wrong, we all like to see a bit of skill. But one of the things that for me is an absolute non-negotiable factor for any player that pulls on the club shirt of the team that we love and cherish, it's the fact that they need to be obvious that they are putting a shift in and that they will absolutely not relinquish any advantage that we have without a fight. And I don't think, in all honesty, that for an awful lot of the Graham Potter era, we saw that. Certainly not in this season, aside from an 8-minute spell away at the Nottingham Forest. And as I say, the irony of irony is that the manager on the receiving end of that particular outcome was the guy that's now in the dugout for us. It's quite an irony. But for me, I think that this is a good start. It's not perfection. There is still much to build on. But bear in mind, Nuno had 2 days to work with the players. He had 2 days to suss out who was who. And whilst I'm sure there would have been players he would have been very aware of, such as Max Kilman, because obviously they did spend time together at Wolverhampton Wanderers. I'm sure he would have been aware of Mateus Fernandes because obviously they're both Portuguese. I'm sure there would have also been players within the squad that, whilst he might have heard of and been aware of at a distance, he might not have been too aware of what they had to offer. And one player that I think that may well have changed that fact for the better for himself is Freddie Potts, because I thought when he came on, he didn't do anything spectacular. But what I will say is that what he was required to do, I thought he did effectively. The movement of the ball around midfield and the efficiency with which he moved the ball from back to front, I think was there to all to see. He moved the ball quickly. He moved the ball with accuracy. And I'll be honest, I would not have a problem if he took to the Emirates, if he started or came on as a substitute. That is up to the manager. But I think that he's certainly given the manager, who may have been aware of Freddie Potts from reports and whatever, and I'm pretty sure that his dad on the bench, Freddie Potts' dad, not Nuno Espirito Santos, just to be clear. Freddie Potts' dad, obviously, Steve Potts, club legend, former captain, Hammer of the Year. I think he had over 500 appearances for the club, so he's in a very exclusive club of claret and blue tinged players in our history going back to 1895. He's in esteemed company, and he was sitting on the bench. Obviously, the father of Freddie, Steve Potts, was sitting on the bench as one of the coaches in Nuno Espirito Santo's lineup. Now, I suspect that a lot of those faces will change because obviously I think fundamentally there will be coaches that Nuno Espirito Santo aligns himself with, and I suspect that in time they will be on the bench. But it would be nice. One of the things I will say, I'd quite like it if we could have at least one of the coaches. Now, whether that's Steve Potts, whether that's Mark Robson, or any of the other coaches that were on the bench that were already at West Ham prior to Nuno turning up at Rush Green, it would be quite nice if one of them could be retained. And the reason why I think that that's quite important is that these are people that are absolutely drenched in the traditions of claret and blue and know what the fans of the club want to see, know what the fans of the club don't want to see. And I always think it's important to have that link to the history of the club. I think that was something that David Moyes was quite acutely aware of. And when you look at the coaching staff he had people like Stuart Pearce, who played for the club once upon a time, Kevin Nolan, who played and captained for the club once upon a time, and it worked to his advantage tremendously. Now, when you look at the 2 managers that have followed David Moyes, and I'm sorry to mention his name, guys, but he was in the dugout last night, in the opposition dugout, and he was the manager that got us our first trophy in a 43-year stint. Whether you like his football, whether I like his football, is neither here nor there. That is a fact, and that remains ever thus. But as I say, I do think he was very clever in utilising players that we'd used in the past who had a connection to the club, who fans would have had a buy-in with just simply because of their history. David Moyes obviously didn't have a history with West Ham as a player, whereas these guys did, Stuart Pearce and Kevin Nolan. And the fact that Lopetegui and Potter didn't really have anyone with any West Ham connections that were there in the backroom staff, at least none that I can remember off the top of my head. And if I've got that wrong, please feel free to remind me of the former player that they had in their squads, in their backroom staff. But I'm pretty sure I'm right. Like I say, I'd like to see one of these coaches retained. As I say, it'd be quite nice to have a Mark Robson who used to play for the club, or a Steve Potts who used to play for the club. Even maybe, I don't know, a little bit out of left field, maybe Carlton Cole. I believe he coaches at the club still. I don't suspect that Mark Noble would be moving from his sporting director role into a coaching capacity. I would very much doubt that. And testament to that fact is the fact that he wasn't involved in that role last night. But like I say, there's a few things there for you to get your teeth into, guys, as far as comments, if you want to get involved and offer me some reports. And if you think that there's things that I've said that are not on the level, if you think there are things that you fundamentally disagree with, that's life. But please feel free to be respectful, but get your point across in the comment section below. But I think for me, a good start. There are things we need to keep working on. Our defending from corners is still not great. Like I say, I accept that this was not a goal that was direct from a corner. We defended the first ball into the box. We did that well. Areola got a good punch, but it was from the resultant play that the goal obviously emerged. And as I say, we need to iron these silly little errors out of our game, because it will be these errors that will cost us in the end. But I suspect the players will have had their confidence buoyed by that showing. I suspect that there will be more drills, more time for the coach and the players to get to know one another. I suspect that Max Kilman, as I say, as a former disciple of Nuno Espirito Santo, will probably have already given the boys a heads up on what to expect from the new gaffer at the London Stadium. But a good start, plenty to work on, and we obviously have got a tough game coming up against Arsenal at the Emirates. It's going to be tricky, but in fairness, we got to remember that whilst our recent form in the Premier League, obviously other than that Nottingham Forest game, has not been great, if we look at our form against Arsenal at the Emirates in the last 2 times we have visited that arena against that opposition, we have actually come away with all 3 points. Last season, we picked up a 1-0 win, which was a goal, interestingly, by Jared Bowen. And the season before, it was obviously a David Moyes team where it was 2-0 was the prevailing scoreline for the boys in claret and blue, with a goal from Thomas Souček in the first half and a headed goal from Konstantinos Mavropanos in the second. So could we maybe do it a third time? Third time's a charm, I believe, is what they say. Could this be the charm that sets Nuno Espirito Santo's team moving up the dizzy heights of the Premier League? There we are, second from bottom. It can only get better, right? Let's see. But there's I say, it's a positive start. There's still a lot we need to work on, but I am heartened by there did seem to be a bit more fight, a little bit more determination, and like I say, the next couple of days will obviously be to the benefit of both the coaches and the players to get to know one another and to implement the style of play of Nuno Espirito Santo in a much more effective way. Whether it happens at the Emirates Stadium or not remains to be seen, but I do suspect that we are going to start to see a little bit of a change of fortune. Before I go, there it is on the screen. Don't forget that the next home game is the Brentford match, and I would encourage anybody that is in a position to do so. And look, this is a matter of choice, and I'm not insisting to people, but I would suggest that you have a strong think about the bigger picture. Yes, you may have paid for a ticket, but at the end of the day, if this is the thing, if you want change at the top of the club, and you may not, and that's perfectly fine, but if you do, then I think that you need to give that boycott very, very serious consideration as to whether you turn up. And if you decide that you're not going to boycott, please don't be fooled into thinking that giving your ticket to a friend or putting it on ticket exchange is the thing to do. At the end of the day, that really does defeat the object of a boycott, in my view. If you're just going to move that ticket on, it's, you know, there is obviously one thing to do, and it's just very simply keep the ticket in your pocket and just watch the game at home on the telly or down the pub, as it says on that previous slide. Yeah, I mean, but as I say, we live in a free country, and if you decide that you don't want change at the club, or maybe you do, but you're going to demonstrate that in other ways, like maybe you're not going to buy any merchandise from the club shop, then if that's the way that you want to do things, it's not for me to say whether you're right or wrong. I'm obviously going to do it my way. You will do it yours, and that is absolutely fine and dandy. But guys, thank you very much indeed for being with me today. And as I say, I want you to get as many of your comments on all of the points and much more that we discussed into the comment section below, and I will try to answer as many of them as I possibly can. But 1-1 at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, honours even between our current head coach, and that is what he's termed as. I saw it on the interview on the club website. He's a head coach, not a manager. Nuno Espirito Santo, and our former manager, Mr. David Moyes. The honours even at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, 1 apiece, with goals from Michael Keane for Everton and Jared Bowen for West Ham United. The man of the match, according to the Premier League website, was Jared Bowen, but I will say, in my opinion, Crysencio Somerville, for me, especially in that second half, was the star of the show. But let me know your thoughts on all of the things we've discussed, guys. Please don't forget to drop a like on the stream. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Just click the little button there with your mouse and hit the bell notification, and it won't cost you any money. We don't get any data sensitive information. It simply helps to grow the channel. Also, as well as liking this stream, if you have got a hype available, please do consider doing that, and maybe why not share this onto your social media platform to help spread the word that we are here, and we are massive, ladies and gentlemen. We are that, and we are on the comeback trail up the Premier League, and off we go. Anyway, guys, thanks very much for your time. Thanks for listening to me rattling on for the last however long. I'm going to disappear, and there's only one thing left to say, and that is, come on, you Irons.